slipped behind the Karu hills, casting long shadows over the lonely stretch of expressway just beyond Mataraba Junction. Few cars dared the road at that hour, dusty, broken in places, with nothing but quiet wind and tall grass on both sides. Obinna Ikenna tapped the steering of his black Lexus with growing frustration. The car had just come back from servicing, and now, of all places, it was coughing and jerking like an old Danfo bus. He was returning from a meeting in Kefi. His suit still smelled of coffee and cologne, but sweat was beginning to soak through the collar. "Not now," he muttered. Then the car gave a final shudder and died. He stepped out, shielding his eyes from the fading light. The road was quiet. No help, no signal bars. He tried calling his driver, his mechanic. Nothing went through. The engine stared back at him like a sleeping beast, silent and stubborn. He knew nothing about cars beyond ignition and fuel. 20 minutes passed. Obinna removed his jacket, tossed it into the back seat, and sighed. He wasn't afraid. He was angry, frustrated, and most of all, embarrassed by the silence surrounding him. That was when he saw her. She came walking slowly from the far edge of the road, barefoot in tired rubber slippers, a faded Ankara scarf loosely tied on her head. Her long brown skirt swayed gently in the wind, dusty and worn. Her face was drawn, her eyes alert. She looked like someone who had fought hunger and won, but just barely. Her name was Zainab Umar. She wasn't from Karu originally. Joss was home, or had been, but since her orphanage released her into the wild world at 18, life had been a river with no paddle. She survived by doing casual labor at sites across the suburbs and sleeping behind Mama Nene's kiosk in Ado when the owners were gone for the day. Zainab paused when she saw the man beside the car. Expensive vehicle, clean white shirt, well-polished shoes. The type of man who might roll up the windows when someone like her walked too close. She wanted to walk on, but something about the open bonnet, the nervous pacing, it reminded her of the countless times people passed her by too. So she crossed the road. Obinna saw her and instinctively held onto his wallet, but she didn't beg. She didn't even ask for anything. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice firm but respectful. Obinna blinked. "Good evening. You need help?" He scoffed. "You know about cars? I used to help a roadside mechanic in Yos, Malam Jammu. I can take a look, if you don't mind." Obinna hesitated. He studied her. Poor, dirty slippers, torn blouse. But she didn't look afraid, and something about her made him pause. "Go ahead," he said finally. Zainab stepped closer and peered into the engine. Her fingers brushed aside a few wires carefully. Then she spotted it. A small connector had slipped loose from vibration. Simple, yet critical. She reattached it, tightened it gently, then stepped back. "Try it now, sir." Obinna slid into the seat, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. He jumped out. You did that?" Zainab nodded. "It was just a wire. Nothing serious." Obinna reached for his wallet and brought out some Naira notes. "Here, take this." Zainab stepped back, her chin lifting slightly. "No, sir. I didn't help you for money. Kindness is not for sale." That line stopped Obinna in his tracks. "Kindness is not for sale," he repeated slowly, like it was something he had forgotten how to believe. After a pause, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small white card. "My name is Obinna Ikenna, CEO of Kitchi West Energy. Come by tomorrow. Ask for me." Zainab took the card with trembling fingers. She didn't smile. She only nodded, quietly. That night, she sat behind Mama Nane's kiosk with half a loaf of bread and water from an old bottle. Her stomach growled. But her heart was full of something strange. Hope. The sun had barely risen over Karu when Zainab stood outside the towering glass gates of Kitchi West Energy Limited. She had bathed behind Mama Nini's kiosk, scrubbed her feet with leftover detergent, and put on her cleanest clothes, a blouse that had faded beyond color and a skirt held together by invisible stitches. She held the white card in her palm like it was a key to a new world. From her spot, she could see the building's reflections shimmer against the morning light. It didn't look like a company. It looked like power wrapped in glass. Uniformed staff hurried in and out of the gate, shoes clicking, voices clipped and confident. Zainab took a deep breath and stepped forward. Two security men saw her approaching and narrowed their eyes. "Hey," one barked. "Where you they go?" She held up the card gently. "Please, I came to see Mr. Obinna. He gave me this yesterday." The taller guard squinted at the card. "Obinna K? You mean our Oga, the CEO?" "Yes, sir," she said quietly. The second guard burst into laughter. "So now you him they expect today? You they craze?" Zainab's hand trembled. "I'm not lying. His car broke down near the express yesterday. I helped him fix it." "A beg shift," the guard said, waving his hand. "We no day joke this early morning. Go beg at the junction." A few passers-by had started to slow down, watching the scene unfold. Zainab felt her chest tighten. She wanted to cry, but she didn't. She wanted to run, but something in her stayed rooted. Inside the third-floor office, Obinna stood by the glass wall of his boardroom, sipping tea and discussing contracts with his executive assistant. Then, like a whisper from fate, something below caught his eye. A small figure, at the gate, arguing, holding something white in her hand. Obinna dropped the cup instantly. "Excuse me," he said, pushing past the assistant. He didn't wait for the elevator. He sprinted down the stairs, 3 at a time, past confused staff and secretaries shouting, "Sir!" after him. At the gate, the guards were still laughing when the building's main door burst open. "Zainab!" Obinna's voice boomed across the lot. No, the guards froze. The crowd quieted. Obinna marched toward them, face stern. "Let her in. She's my guest." The shorter guard stammered, "Sir, we didn't know. She showed you my card." The taller one bowed his head. "We thought, maybe." Obinna turned to Zainab. "I'm sorry," he said, softer now. "You should have called me." She looked down. "I don't have a phone." He nodded slowly. "Come with me." As they walked past the polished marble floors, everyone stared. Interns, secretaries, even middle managers. Zainab clutched her bag tighter, conscious of her clothes, her slippers, her scent. But Obinna walked beside her calmly, like she belonged. He led her into his office. Spacious, minimalist, filled with framed certificates and leather chairs. He motioned for her to sit. She perched at the edge of the chair, like a visitor in a royal palace. He sat across from her. "Zainab, tell me about yourself." She hesitated. Then slowly her story poured out. The orphanage, the mechanic, the hustle, the construction jobs, the days she went without food, the nights she fought mosquitoes in shame behind that wooden kiosk. Obinna listened in silence. Not the distracted kind, the kind that heard every crack in her voice. Then he leaned forward. "I want to help you, but not just with money. I want to help your future." She blinked. "Sir? I'll get you a tutor, someone to teach you again, help you take exams. I'll also give you a job, nothing hard, just cleaning at our garage, in a room in staff quarters, so you never sleep on the streets again." Zainab's mouth opened, but no words came. Her hands trembled on her lap. She had been offered many things in life. Leftover food, mocking pity, backhanded insults, but never dignity. "You deserve a new life," he said, standing. "Let's begin." That night, Zainab lay on a small mattress in the company's staff quarters. The room was quiet, clean, safe. There was a small window that let the breeze in. For the first time in years, she didn't fall asleep from exhaustion. She fell asleep with hope. By the next Monday morning, the garage floor at Catchy West Energy was already swept clean before the sun was fully out. The tools were arranged in perfect order, the rag bin emptied, and the air smelled of disinfectant and petrol. Zainab stood in a plain gray uniform, slightly oversized but clean, tucking her scarf beneath the collar as she double-checked every shelf. She wasn't just cleaning a space, she was resetting her life. Later that day, A woman named Miss Deborah, soft-spoken but firm, arrived as the private tutor Obinna had arranged. She brought along a stack of old WOAEC papers, notebooks, in a single pencil case. "We're starting from scratch," Deborah said gently, "but I believe in you." Zainab nodded. Her fingers trembled as she held the pen. It had been years since she read a full paragraph without stopping. She had forgotten how hard letters could be, but for the first time, failure didn't frighten her. She was finally learning, not to survive, but to grow. Every evening she studied by the light of a rechargeable lamp. Every morning she cleaned the garage before the other staff arrived. And when anyone insulted her or whispered behind her back, she smiled and kept walking. One day a loud shout echoed from the far side of the garage. "Where's the jack? This tire is flat." It was Mr. Emmanuel, one of the drivers, frustrated and sweaty beside a company pickup truck. Zainab walked over slowly. "Let me help." He raised an eyebrow. You know tire?" She nodded calmly and knelt beside the vehicle. In 10 minutes, the tire was changed. Unknown to her, Obinna had just walked into the garage, pausing at the entrance. He watched her from behind a stack of engine oil cartons. How she worked fast but with care. How she wiped her hands afterward with a tattered cloth from her pocket. She didn't see him, but his heart saw something clearer than sight. Later that afternoon, he called her into his office. "Where did you learn all this?" Zainab smiled lightly. "Malam Jammu, sir, in Jos. I used to help him clean spark plugs, fix cakey tires. I guess some things stuck." Obinna nodded, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "You're full of surprises." She laughed gently. "Only the useful kind." And from that day forward, something in the air shifted. He no longer saw her as just the girl who fixed his car. He saw her as someone the world had overlooked, but who had never overlooked herself. Days passed, then weeks. Zainab became known in the building, not for what people feared, but for what they admired. She was polite, punctual, and honest. When someone dropped a wallet, she returned it. When an elderly cleaner fell sick, she helped cover their work. When people whispered, she simply smiled. But someone else noticed all this too. Victoria Oyedele, Obinna's personal assistant. From behind her glass-paneled office, Victoria watched how Obinna greeted Zainab in passing. She noticed his smile when he mentioned her name in meetings. She heard the way he asked, "How's Zainab's tutoring going?" And it burned. Victoria had worked in kiosk for 2 years. She wore imported suits, curled her hair every Thursday, brought Obinna tea before he even asked. But Obinna had never once called her by name in public. And now this garage girl was shining. Victoria adjusted her lipstick and began to scheme. At first it was just the occasional glance. Then came the half smiles that carried judgment, the awkward silences when Zainab entered a room, the shared chuckles that followed after she walked away. Gossip had found a new name to chew, and it tasted like ambition, class betrayal, and envy. "She dey shine teeth for Oga too much. I hear say she dey sweep him heart as she dey sweep garage. You know go believe when I see yesterday. He hold door for him." Zainab heard the whispers, felt their sting in the way staff avoided eye contact, how they paused conversations when she walked by. At first she tried to ignore it. She reminded herself why she was here, to learn, to work, to grow. But whispers have a way of growing into storms. The worst storm, however, was building behind a desk on the second floor. Victoria Oyedele. She watched Zainab's every move. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was rage. Victoria couldn't understand it. She had the looks, the style, the accent. She even bought Obinna cufflinks last Christmas. But he barely noticed. Now he was noticing Zainab, smiling at her, asking for her input during meetings, as if her opinion mattered more than years of loyal service. One evening, just before the close of work, Victoria knocked on Obinna's office door. "Come in," he said, not looking up. "Sir, may I speak freely?" she asked with the sweetness of palm wine left too long in the sun. Obinna looked up and nodded. "Go ahead." She sat, legs crossed, and leaned in. "It's about Zainab." Obinna's expression didn't change. Hey, sir, please don't take this the wrong way, but I think you need to be careful. People are talking, staff are uncomfortable, some even believe she might be using you. Using me? He asked quietly. Victoria nodded, playing the loyal soldier. Sir, these street girls, they know how to act humble, but sometimes they're the smartest manipulators. There was a long pause. Obinna's face remained unreadable. Then he said, Thank you, Victoria. You may go now. Victoria stood slowly, her smile tight. As she walked out, she felt victorious, like she had just thrown sand into a fire. But what she didn't know was, Obinna saw through it all. That same week, Obinna met with 3 senior board members at an exclusive lounge in Asokoro. They laughed over champagne and policy changes, until one of them cleared his throat. Obinna, he said, we've been hearing some rumors. Obinna leaned back, calm. The girl, the cleaner, another added. We heard you're close to her. A third joined. It's your personal business, of course, but as your elders, we want to remind you, people watch everything, and Nigeria is not always kind to stories that don't fit its expectations. Obinna smiled lightly, but said nothing. They sipped their drinks, thinking they had said enough. Later that evening, back at his apartment, Obinna stood by the window staring out at the Karu skyline. The words played in his head like an old broken record. Be careful, she's using you. She's not your class. But then another memory flashed. Zainab under his car bonnet, fixing a problem he couldn't understand. Her hands steady, her voice calm. Kindness is not for sale. He exhaled slowly. The world might measure worth by shoes, accents, and bank accounts. But he had seen something deeper, something real. And for the first time in his life, he found himself wondering, why does love always need permission to be believed? The days that followed felt heavier, not because of heat or work, but because of the air. Thick with judgment, heavy with eyes. Zainab could feel it everywhere. In the break room where conversations stopped when she walked in. In the garage where junior staff exchanged looks instead of greetings. Even in the stairway where laughter followed her like a mocking shadow. She had never asked for attention. All she ever wanted was a clean job, a quiet space, and a little dignity. But now it seemed her very presence had become a question people couldn't stop trying to answer. Why her? What is she doing near the boss? What does she really want? Zainab tried to pretend it didn't bother her. She smiled. She worked. She studied. But at night, when the lights were off and the generator hummed quietly in the background, the question sat beside her on the bed. Maybe they were right. One evening, she overheard 2 kitchen staff whispering near the water tank. Make I talk true. I no trust that girl. She sabi pretend well. Na so, she won't use pity enter Oga's heart. Them go soon hear wedding bell. Zainab froze in place. She wasn't angry. She was tired. That night, in the small staff room she had come to call home, she sat on her mattress with her books open on her lap. She didn't read a word. Her eyes stayed on a page she couldn't focus on. Her mind wandered back to the orphanage in Jos, to the empty bowls, to the nights she cried herself to sleep, to the streets where she learned how to survive. She had come so far, but now it felt like she was falling backward into shame. I didn't come here for this, she whispered. She looked at her notes, the arithmetic, the physics, the paragraphs she had worked so hard to understand. They once gave her hope. Now they looked like a distant dream wrapped in too much noise. Quietly, she folded her books into her bag. She packed her clothes, 3 skirts, 2 blouses, 1 sweater. She stared at the room for a long moment. Then, without telling anyone, Zainab stepped out into the night. The gate man nodded as she walked past, unaware that it would be the last time. She walked the long road past the compound, into the heart of Mararaba. Her bag bounced on her shoulder. The night breeze was cool against her skin. But inside, she was burning with something deeper than sadness. It was shame. By morning, the garage was swept, but Zainab was gone. Obinna arrived earlier than usual that day. He stopped by the garage before heading upstairs, excited to ask her about her upcoming mock exam. But she wasn't there. He asked one of the junior cleaners, "Have you seen Zainab?" "No, sir. She didn't come today." Obinna's smile dropped. He went to the staff quarters, knocked on her door. No answer. He opened it. Neat bed, empty hanger. No books, no bag. Gone. He tried her phone, switched off. He called Deborah, her tutor. "Did Zainab say anything to you?" "No, sir," came the soft reply. "But last week she looked different, like something was weighing her." Obinna sat on the edge of her empty bed. For a long time he said nothing. Then he stood, got into his car, and drove. He went back to the old Karu Express, hoping lightning might strike twice. He waited for hours in the same spot where they met, but the road remained silent. Every day after that, he drove through the corners of Ado, Mararaba, and Nyanya, asking shop owners, hawkers, and security men the same question. "Have you seen a girl named Zainab?" Some shrugged, some stared, but no one said yes. And each night, Obinna sat by his bedroom window looking out at the streetlights of Abuja, whispering to the night air, "Come back, 3 weeks." That's how long it had been since Zainab vanished, since the silence in the garage grew louder than the machines, since Obinna's mornings felt incomplete and his nights were filled with unanswered questions. He had checked every place she might go, called the mechanic she once mentioned in Yo's, paid dispatch riders to search shelters, left messages with volunteers near Ma'araba and Nyanya. Still nothing. Zainab had disappeared like dust swept from a floor, gone without a trace. Until that Tuesday. Obinna was standing in the parking lot at Kechi West speaking with his logistics officer when one of the company drivers walked up hesitantly. "Good morning, sir," the man said, clutching his cap nervously. "Yes," Obinna replied, distracted. "Sir, I saw that girl, the one from the garage." Obinna's head turned instantly. "Where?" "Yesterday, around Ado Junction, near the old cement factory. There's a construction site there. She was working." Obinna froze. "Are you sure?" "I'm very sure, sir. I slowed down to look. She was carrying blocks, wearing a brown skirt and big t-shirt." Obinna didn't wait for another word. Within minutes, he was in the front seat of his SUV, the driver navigating through the dusty streets of Ado like a man chasing time. His heart thumped with every bump in the road. What would he say? Why did she leave? Did she hate him now? The construction site was busy. Cement dust rose in the air like fog. Workers moved back and forth with shovels, planks, wheelbarrows. Then he saw her. Zainab. She was thinner, her scarf now a faded purple cloth tied tightly around her head. Her shirt hung from her shoulders like borrowed fabric. On her head was a heavy block, her steps slow, her eyes forward. Obinna didn't move at first. He just stood there watching her walk, his heart twisted, not because she looked poor, not because she looked tired, but because she looked out of place, like someone who belonged to something better but had forgotten it. He took a step forward, then another. And then he called out, gently but firmly, "Zainab." She stopped. Her body stiffened. Slowly she turned, the block still resting on her head. Their eyes met across dust and silence. She carefully brought the block down, placed it on the sand, and wiped her face with her sleeve. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice low. Obinna stepped closer. "I've been looking every day." "I left so I wouldn't bring shame to you," she said, eyes lowered. "Everyone was talking. I knew I didn't belong in your world." Obinna's eyes burned. He shook his head. "No," he whispered. "You don't belong here, carrying blocks like you have no worth." He stepped forward and took her hand. She didn't pull away. "You belong in my life," he said, "in a place where people see you the way I see you." Zainab swallowed hard. Her lips trembled. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he said, "but I want to." And right there, surrounded by sweating men, falling dust and half-built walls, Obinna did what no one expected. He pulled her into a tight, unashamed embrace. He didn't care that her clothes were dusty. He didn't care that people were staring. In that moment, it wasn't about company policy or class or gossip. It was about love, raw and real. One of the workers dropped his shovel and whispered, "Wait, no be the CEO of kiosk be that?" Another one said, "Na Zainab wait a clean garage." But Obinna didn't hear them. He looked her in the eyes. "Come with me," he said. And for the first time in weeks, Zainab nodded. Not in fear, but in peace. The ride back to town was quiet, not with awkwardness, but with something gentle, like rain after drought. Zainab sat in the passenger seat, her hands resting on her lap, staring at the road as it passed. Obinna didn't rush her with questions. He only drove, glancing at her now and then, his eyes soft. After some time she spoke. "I thought if I left, it would stop the whispers. I thought I was doing you a favor." Obinna kept his eyes on the road. "You were wrong," he said. "You were punishing yourself for other people's noise." She nodded slowly. That noise became loud in my chest. He reached over and placed a hand on hers. "Well, I heard something louder the day you fixed my car. I heard truth, and I'm not going to forget it because people are afraid of what they don't understand." Soon they pulled into a quiet street in Asokoro Extension. Tall trees swayed gently above painted walls. A sleek, modern building sat calmly between flower-lined pavements. Zainab blinked. "Where is this?" Obinna smiled. "Home for now. My sister Ifeoma manages short-let apartments here. One is ready." Before she could argue, the front door opened and Ifeoma, bright-eyed and friendly, came out with a warm smile. "You must be Zainab. I've heard a lot about you." Zainab's face flushed. "I hope it was good." Ifeoma laughed and handed her a key. "Come in. Let me show you your space." The apartment was simple, but beautiful. A soft beige couch, a clean bed with white sheets, a small kitchen with a blinking fridge light. The curtains danced lightly with the breeze. Zainab stood in the center of the room, speechless. "This is too much," she said. Obinna stepped in, placing a new phone and a small box of groceries on the table. "It's not too much," he replied. "It's what you deserve." She turned to him, overwhelmed. "But why are you doing all this?" He looked at her without hesitation. "Because I believe in you, and because this time, I don't want to just fix your today. I want to build your tomorrow." Later that evening, they sat on the balcony drinking zobo and watching the sky melt into orange. Zainab hadn't smiled like that in a long time, full and without worry. "I'm setting up a small business in your name," Obinna said casually. "A mechanical service for women. Clean, safe, and supervised. You'll run it while you continue school. We'll register it next week." Her mouth dropped. "What? You're not going back to clean garages. You're going to build them, and I'll sponsor your education through it all." Zainab covered her face with her palms. She wasn't crying from pain this time, but from joy she didn't know how to hold. That night in the quiet room with bright windows, Zainab prayed, not just with words, but with tears and a full heart. And for the first time in years, her dreams didn't feel like borrowed pages. They felt like a book she could finally write. 1 year later, the morning sun kissed the rooftops of Karu gently, and the city buzzed with its usual hum. But on a quiet university campus in Nasarawa, a young woman stood outside the Department of Mechanical Engineering, smiling to herself. Zainab Umar, now 26, wore blue jeans and a crisp white shirt. Her bag hung confidently across her shoulder, and her braided hair danced freely in the breeze. In her hand was her student ID card, freshly laminated, with the word engineering, bold and clear beneath her name. She looked like someone who had fought battles and won. Her classmates knew her as the quiet one, who always asked the hardest questions in practical class. Lecturers noticed how she cleaned engine parts with the care of someone who once worked with her hands before working with her mind. She was no longer the girl who fixed a car on Karu Road. She was now the girl building a future from that very moment. As she stepped out of the university gate, a familiar black SUV slowed to a stop. The window rolled down. "Good afternoon, engineer," said Obinna, grinning. Zainab laughed as she opened the door and slid in. "You're early." "I couldn't wait," he said. "How was class?" "We stripped the generator engine and reassembled it. Guess who did it fastest?" He raised a brow. "You?" She winked. "I had a good teacher once. Name started with J." They laughed, the kind of laughter that comes from knowing the storms they had weathered. Obinna drove them out of the school compound, then took a turn that didn't lead back to the city. "Where are we going?" she asked, surprised. He smiled. "Somewhere quiet." 10 minutes later, they arrived at a peaceful stretch along the river Usuma, just before the dam. The water sparkled under the afternoon sun. Birds danced in the trees. It was the same place he had once brought her after registering her business. The same place he said she deserved more. He turned off the engine and stepped out. Zainab followed, her sandals sinking slightly into the soft earth. Obinna took her hands and looked into her eyes. "Zainab," he said, voice low, "this past year with you has been the best part of my life. I've watched you grow, fight, rise, and stay humble. And every time I think of love, I think of your heart first." Zainab's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't used to this kind of language, but it didn't feel strange anymore. It felt earned. "I want to build a life with you," he continued, "not out of pity, not to prove anyone wrong, but because I can't imagine the rest of my days without your strength beside me." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a silver ring with a tiny star-shaped diamond, simple, clean, and beautiful. "Like her, Zainab Umar," he said. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes, but this time they didn't fall from fear, pain, or shame. They came from a joy so deep it reached into the bones. She nodded slowly, smiling through the tears. "Yes, Obinna. Yes." He slipped the ring on her finger. The river sang, the wind swirled, and the world, for that moment, stood still. And so the girl who once slept behind a wooden kiosk became the woman who carried books, ran her own small workshop, and found love where she least expected it. This story reminds us, never measure a person by their clothes, nor their hunger, nor their past. Some people are gold covered in dust. All they need is one moment of kindness and someone who believes. Zainab fixed a wire, but in doing so, she also fixed a future. Doing